Emma Brooks stood at the entrance of Training Facility Delta 7, carrying a worn leather case that looked older than most of the equipment inside. The case had scratches and faded patches from years of use. She was 22 years old, with steady brown eyes and calloused hands that spoke of years spent outdoors. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the standard gray training uniform like all the other new cadets. The year was 2487, and the Galactic Coalition Military Academy accepted the best shooters from across dozens of star systems. Emma had traveled from Earth, specifically from Montana, a place most aliens had never heard of. She had passed the basic tests to get here, but now came the real challenge. Inside the facility, the air hummed with technology. Holographic displays showed distant targets. Computer systems beeped and chirped. Other cadets gathered in small groups, showing off their weapons. Most carried sleek plasma rifles with glowing power cells and digital targeting scopes. Some had energy weapons that looked like they belonged in museums, rare and expensive. Emma found an empty bench near the equipment display area. She set down her case and opened it slowly. The latches clicked with a sound that seemed too loud in the high-tech room. Inside, nestled in faded foam padding, lay her rifle. It was a bolt-action rifle with a wooden stock that showed the grain of real earth oak. The metal parts were clean but clearly used, with tiny scratches that told stories of countless hours at shooting ranges. The scope was manual, with actual glass lenses instead of computer projections. There were no power cells, no glowing lights, no digital displays. Just metal, wood, and careful engineering from another era. A shadow fell across her bench. Emma looked up to see a tall figure with blue-tinged skin and 4 arms. Kyle Henderson was a Zenthari, a species known for having excellent natural eyesight and quick reflexes. He was considered one of the top cadets in the incoming class. 2 other cadets stood behind him, grinning. "Is that a museum piece?" Kyle asked, his voice carrying across the room. Other cadets turned to look. "Did you bring that from a history display?" Emma did not reply. She lifted the rifle from its case and began assembling it. Her movements were practiced and smooth. First the scope, twisting it into place with firm turns. Then the bolt, sliding it in and testing the action. The mechanical clicks sounded primitive compared to the electronic hums around them. "Look at this," another voice said. Emma glanced over to see Lisa Morgan, another human cadet from New York. Lisa carried a standard-issue plasma rifle with all the latest modifications. "Emma, why did you not bring a real weapon? We are competing against the best shooters in the galaxy. You need every advantage." More cadets gathered around. Some laughed. Others shook their heads. A cadet from the insect-like crick species made a clicking sound that Emma knew was their version of mockery. "That thing probably cannot even hit targets past 500 meters, Kyle said. He held up his own rifle, a top-of-the-line Zenthari plasma weapon with a targeting computer that could track moving objects automatically. "This can lock onto targets 3,000 meters away and adjust for wind, gravity, even the target's predicted movement." "What does your ancient toy do?" Emma finished assembling her rifle. She ran her hand along the wooden stock, feeling the familiar smoothness. "It shoots," she said quietly. The crowd laughed louder. Kyle smirked and walked away, followed by his group. Lisa lingered for a moment, looking concerned. "Emma, I am serious. You should at least get a basic plasma rifle. The instructors will not go easy on us just because you brought outdated gear." "I know," Emma said. She did not explain that this rifle had belonged to her grandfather. She did not mention the thousands of rounds she had fired through it, or the countless hours spent learning every tiny detail of how it worked. Some things did not need explaining. Across the room, near the instructor station, Captain Peter Hayes stood watching. He was a human, probably in his 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes. He had been watching Emma since she walked in. Now he saw her rifle, saw the way she handled it, and something changed in his expression. The corners of his mouth lifted just slightly. Next to him stood Commander Vex Nar, a tall reptilian officer from the Korvathi Empire. The commander noticed Hayes's expression. "You know something about that weapon," Vex Nar said. It was not a question. Hayes said nothing, but his smile grew a bit wider. The orientation briefing began an hour later. All 70 cadets assembled in the main training hall. Holographic displays showed the course outline. Commander Vexenar spoke first, his voice deep and clear. "You are here because you passed basic qualifications," he said. "But basic is not enough. This program will test your skills at extreme ranges, in difficult conditions, against moving targets. You will shoot in wind, in rain, in gravity fields different from your home worlds. Your computers will fail. Your equipment will malfunction. We will see who has real skill and who only has expensive gear." Captain Hayes stepped forward. "The top 3 cadets at the end of this program will receive placement in the Galactic Rangers, 1st Recon Division. That is the most elite unit in the Coalition. They go where others cannot. They take shots others will not attempt. If you want that position, you will earn it." The room buzzed with excited whispers. The Galactic Rangers were legendary. Every cadet here wanted that spot. Emma sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, but her heart beat faster. This was why she came. This was what her grandfather had trained her for, even if he never knew she would end up among the stars. "Training begins tomorrow at 0600 hours, Hayes continued. "Be on the range. Be ready." Dismissed. As the cadets filed out, Emma stayed behind for a moment. She looked at the holographic displays showing the training course. Targets at 500 meters, 1,000 meters, even further. Moving targets. Targets in bad weather. Her rifle could handle it. The question was whether she could handle the pressure, the competition, and the doubt from everyone around her. She picked up her rifle case and headed for the barracks. Behind her, Captain Hayes watched her go, and his expression was thoughtful. The morning air was cold when Emma arrived at the shooting range. The sky above the training facility was gray, and a light wind blew across the open field. She was early, but not the first. Several cadets were already checking their equipment and talking in small groups. Emma found a spot at firing position 12. She set down her rifle case and opened it carefully. The morning light caught the wood grain of the stock. She began her pre-shoot routine, the same one her grandfather had taught her when she was 8 years old. Check the barrel. Check the bolt. Check the scope mounting. Every detail mattered. "Still using that antique?" Kyle's voice came from 2 positions over. He was setting up his plasma rifle on an advanced stabilizing mount. The rifle's computer screen glowed blue, running diagnostics. "I thought maybe you would come to your senses overnight." Emma did not respond. She loaded 5 rounds into the magazine. The brass cartridges gleamed dully. Around her, other cadets powered up their energy weapons. Electronic beeps and hums filled the air. Her rifle was silent. Captain Hayes and Commander Vexenar walked along the firing line. Hayes stopped at each position, checking equipment and giving brief instructions. When he reached Emma's station, he paused longer than at the others. His eyes scanned her rifle, noting every detail. "Cadet Brooks," he said formally, "are you certain this weapon meets your needs?" "Yes, sir," Emma replied, standing at attention. Hayes nodded once and moved on. But Emma saw something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition or memory. It was gone before she could be sure. "Cadets, attention!" Commander Vexenar's voice boomed across the range. Everyone stood straight. Today's qualification is simple. Targets at 500 meters. 5 shots each. Acceptable score is 4 hits center mass. Begin when ready. The firing line erupted with activity. Plasma rifles whined as they charged. Targeting computers beeped as they locked onto distant targets. Emma settled into position behind her rifle. She pressed her cheek against the stock, feeling the wood's coolness. Through the scope, she could see her target, a simple silhouette 500 meters downrange. She took a breath. Let half of it out. Held. Her finger touched the trigger, applying steady pressure. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that sounded impossibly loud compared to the quiet hiss of plasma weapons. The recoil pushed back against her shoulder, familiar and solid. Downrange, the target registered a hit. Perfect center. But the sound had drawn attention. Several cadets glanced her way. A few smirked. The loud bang seemed primitive, almost embarrassing compared to the sleek efficiency of energy weapons. "Lucky shot," someone muttered. Emma worked the bolt. The empty brass cartridge ejected and landed on the ground beside her with a small clink. She chambered another round. Aimed. Breathed. Fired. Another crack. Another perfect hit. By her fifth shot, a small crowd had gathered behind the firing line to watch. All 5 of her shots had hit dead center. The scoring computer showed a perfect qualification. But instead of congratulations, she heard dismissive comments. 500 meters is nothing, Kyle said loudly. My targeting computer could make those shots with its eyes closed. Wait until we get to real distances. Lisa Morgan finished her own qualification, scoring 4 hits out of 5. She walked over to Emma, looking both impressed and worried. That was good shooting, she said quietly. But Kyle is right about one thing. The real tests are coming. Are you sure that rifle can handle longer ranges? It can, Emma said simply. She began cleaning her rifle, wiping down the barrel with a soft cloth. The second day brought harder challenges. The range extended to 1,000 meters. But this time, environmental variables were added. Large fans created crosswinds. Humidity generators made the air thick and wet. Gravity plates underneath the range created subtle fluctuations in the gravitational field. Emma watched as the first cadets took their shots. Many relied heavily on their weapon computers to calculate the variables. But the computers were not perfect. Wind sensors gave readings, but the wind was not constant. Humidity affected different weapon types differently. The gravity fluctuations happened too fast for the computers to track properly. Hit rates dropped. Cadets who had scored perfectly at 500 meters were now missing half their shots. Frustration showed on faces. Some cadets argued with their weapons computers as if the machines were being deliberately difficult. Kyle Henderson stepped up to the line. His advanced Zenthary rifle was top of the line, worth more than most people earned in a year. The targeting screen flickered as it processed multiple data streams. He fired 5 shots. 2 hits, 3 misses. His face darkened with anger. The equipment is malfunctioning, he protested to Commander Vex NAR. These conditions are interfering with the targeting systems. Combat does not provide perfect conditions, Vex NAR replied. Adapt or fail. Next shooter. Emma's turn came. She settled into position, but she did not immediately fire. Instead, she pulled out a small worn notebook from her pocket. It had a leather cover, cracked with age. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, numbers, diagrams. Her grandfather's writing mixed with her own. She watched the flags downrange, seeing how they moved in the wind. She felt the humid air on her skin. She noted the slight dizziness that came from the gravity fluctuations. Then she began calculating. Not with a computer. With a pencil. She wrote numbers in her notebook, using formulas her grandfather had taught her decades before computers tried to do the same job. Behind her, cadets whispered and pointed. Some laughed at the sight of someone doing math with a pencil. Kyle's voice carried clearly. Is she seriously using a notebook? What century is she from? Emma finished her calculations. She adjusted her scope by hand, turning the adjustment knobs with careful precision. She settled behind the rifle and fired her first shot. Hit. She worked the bolt, adjusted slightly, fired again. Hit. 5 shots. 5 hits. Not just hits, but tight groupings that showed consistent accuracy. The whispers behind her changed tone. They were not quite as mocking now. Lisa Morgan stared at the scoring display in disbelief. Even Kyle had gone quiet. Captain Hayes approached during the lunch break. Emma was sitting alone, eating a simple meal and cleaning her rifle. The weapon was completely disassembled, each part laid out on a cloth in precise order. May I? Hayes gestured to the bench. Emma nodded, and he sat down. For a long moment, he just looked at the rifle components. His eyes traced the wear patterns on the bolt, the slight discoloration on the barrel from thousands of rounds fired, the careful modifications that only an expert would notice. This is not your first rifle, he said. No, sir. It was my grandfather's. He passed it to me when I was 18. He taught you well. Yes, sir. He was a sniper. Earth military, back before the coalition. Hayes nodded slowly. He reached out and gently touched the stock, running his fingers along the wood. "These wear marks here," he pointed to specific spots. "This is from countless hours in prone position. And here, where the finish is worn. That is from being carried the same way, over and over." Emma looked at him with new understanding. "You know rifles like this?" "I used to," Hayes said. He stood up. "Carry on, Cadet Brooks." He walked away without saying more, but Emma felt something had changed. He knew. Whatever he saw in her rifle, it meant something to him. That evening in the barracks, Emma sat on her bunk with her rifle across her lap. Most other cadets used automated cleaning systems for their weapons. Just place the gun in a machine, and it did everything. But Emma cleaned hers by hand, the way her grandfather had taught her. Oil on a cloth, working it into every part, checking each component for wear or damage. Kyle walked past her bunk. He paused, watching her work. "You know," he said, his voice dripping with mock concern, "they make machines that can do that in 30 seconds. But I guess if you want to waste your time with primitive rituals, that is your choice." Emma looked up at him. "A machine does not learn the rifle," she said. "Cleaning it by hand, I feel every part. I know if something is wrong before it becomes a problem. A machine just cleans. I learn." Kyle snorted and walked away. But Lisa, from the next bunk over, was listening. She looked thoughtful. Day 5 arrived with storm clouds overhead. The training had progressed steadily through the week, and each day the challenges grew harder. Targets moved faster. Distances increased. Weather conditions worsened. Emma had maintained consistent performance, but so had several other cadets. Kyle Henderson, despite his complaints about equipment, was a naturally gifted shooter. Lisa Morgan had improved dramatically, learning to trust her instincts more than her computer. Today's exercise was the most difficult yet. Commander Vex NAR explained it during the morning briefing. Advanced Targeting Exercise. Range extended to 2,500 meters. Targets are aerial drones, moving at variable speeds. Weather conditions will be uncontrolled. You will shoot in whatever nature provides. As if on cue, the wind picked up. Rain began to fall, light at first, then steadily heavier. The cadets looked up at the sky with concern. 2,500 meters was already an extreme distance. Adding wind and rain made it nearly impossible. "Sir," Kyle spoke up, requesting postponement. "These conditions will damage sensitive equipment. The rain will interfere with targeting computers and plasma containment fields." Several other cadets nodded in agreement. Their expensive, high-tech weapons were not designed for heavy rain. Water could short out electronics. Optical systems would fog up. Energy weapons needed clear paths to their targets. Captain Hayes stepped forward. His voice was hard. "In combat, the enemy does not wait for good weather. Equipment fails. Technology stops working. Rain falls. Wind blows. What matters is whether you can still complete the mission." The exercise continues. The cadets moved to the firing line with obvious reluctance. Many tried to shield their weapons from the rain with tarps and covers. Maintenance crews stood by with towels and electronic repair kits. The mood was tense. Emma took her position. Rain ran down her face and dripped from her nose. Her rifle was already wet, but that did not matter. The wooden stock actually gripped better when damp. The mechanical components were sealed and weather-resistant. Her grandfather had used this rifle in rain, snow, dust, and mud. It would work. The first drones launched into the gray sky. They were small, moving targets, harder to track than stationary silhouettes. At 2,500 meters, they were barely visible through the rain and mist. The first shooter was a cadet from the Priam species, known for their excellent hand-eye coordination. His plasma rifle hummed as it attempted to lock onto a target. The targeting computer beeped, displaying error messages. Water had gotten into the sensor array. He fired anyway, trusting the partial lock. The bolt of energy went wide, missing by at least 50 meters. He tried again. Another miss. On his third shot, his rifle sputtered and shut down completely, its systems overwhelmed by moisture. "Equipment malfunction," he reported, frustrated. Score 0, Commander Vex NAR replied without sympathy. Next shooter. One by one, cadets attempted the impossible shot. The hit rate was terrible. Most managed no hits at all. A few got lucky with grazing hits that barely scored. The targeting computers could not handle the combination of distance, moving targets, and bad weather. Some shut down. Others provided wildly inaccurate data. Frustration mounted along the firing line. Kyle Henderson's turn came. His face was set with determination. His rifle was the most advanced on the line, designed specifically to handle difficult conditions. The targeting screen flickered but stayed active. He tracked a drone, waiting for a lock. The computer beeped. He fired. Mississippi. He tried to compensate manually. The rifle overheated from excessive recalibration attempts. Warning lights flashed red on his display. He slammed his fist against the firing platform. "This is impossible," he said loudly. "No one can make this shot in these conditions." "Cadet Brooks, you are up," Hayes called out. Emma stepped to the line. Water dripped from her uniform. Her rifle was soaked, but she wiped the scope lens carefully with a cloth from her pocket. She did not immediately get into firing position. Instead, she stood upright, watching. Just watching. Minutes passed. Other cadets shifted impatiently. The rain continued to fall. Emma watched the drones flying their patterns. She watched the rain itself, seeing how it fell, how the wind pushed it. She watched distant trees bending in the gusts. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the wind on her face, learning its rhythm. 5 full minutes passed. Kyle muttered something about wasting time. Other cadets grew restless. But Captain Hayes watched silently, and Commander Vex NAR made no move to hurry her. Finally, Emma settled into position behind her rifle. She pulled out her notebook, now damp with rain. The pages were waterproof, treated with a coating her grandfather had applied. She made calculations, her pencil moving steadily despite the water. She made one final adjustment to her scope. Then she became very still. Through the scope, she could barely see the drone. It was a tiny speck moving against gray clouds. She tracked it, not with a computer, but with years of practice. Her breathing slowed. Her heartbeat steadied. She felt the wind, anticipated its next gust. She saw the drone's pattern, understood where it would be. She fired. The crack of the rifle was sharp in the rain. Then came the waiting. At this distance, the bullet needed several seconds to reach its target. Everyone on the line watched the distant sky. 3 seconds. 4. 5. The drone exploded in a small flash of light and debris. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain. Then the electronic scoreboard updated with a number that made everyone stare. Distance, 2,847 meters. Direct hit. The firing line fell completely silent. Even the maintenance crews stopped what they were doing. Commander Vex NAR looked at his handheld scanner, then checked it again. He tapped the device, as if it might be malfunctioning. "Verify that reading," he ordered one of the range technicians. The technician ran multiple checks on the scoring system. "Reading confirmed, sir. Drone destroyed at 2,847 meters. Shot verified as cadet initiated." Kyle Henderson stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. Lisa Morgan's eyes were wide with disbelief. Other cadets looked from the scoreboard to Emma and back again, as if trying to understand what had just happened. "That is impossible," Kyle finally said. "She must have cheated somehow. Maybe the rifle has hidden computer systems. We should inspect it." Captain Hayes walked slowly toward Emma's position. The entire range watched him. He stopped in front of her firing platform. Emma stood at attention, her wet rifle held properly across her chest. Hayes leaned in close. The other cadets could not hear what he whispered to her. Only Emma heard the words. Her expression remained neutral, professional, but something changed in her eyes. A moment of understanding passed between the old instructor and the young cadet. Hayes straightened and turned to face the assembled cadets. His voice carried clearly across the range despite the rain. "The shot is verified and official. At 2,847 meters, this is the second longest successful hit in the history of this academy." He paused, letting that sink in. The record, he continued, was set 20 years ago. By me. Now the silence was complete. Rain fell on upturned faces. Everyone stared at Captain Hayes with new understanding. He had been a sniper. One of the best. And he recognized what Emma had done because he had done it himself. Exercise complete, Hayes said. Dismissed. As the cadets filed away, many glanced back at Emma. The mockery was gone from their faces. In its place was something else. Respect, perhaps. Or maybe just confusion. How had someone with such a simple rifle accomplished what their advanced technology could not? Emma worked the bolt of her rifle, ejecting the spent brass. It fell into her hand, still warm. She pocketed it, just as her grandfather had taught her to do. Never waste brass. Each empty cartridge was a reminder of a shot taken, a lesson learned. She was wiping down her rifle when Lisa approached. The other cadet looked different now. The dismissive attitude was gone. How? Lisa asked simply. How did you make that shot? Emma looked at her for a moment. Then she said, I watched. I calculated. I felt the wind. I trusted my training. But without a computer, how did you know where to aim? The same way shooters knew for hundreds of years before computers, Emma replied. Math. Observation. Experience. My grandfather taught me that technology is a tool, not a replacement for skill. When technology fails, skill remains. Lisa nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. She looked down at her own plasma rifle with its dead targeting computer. Then back at Emma. Will you teach me? She asked. Emma smiled slightly. I can try. News of Emma's shot spread through the academy like electricity through water. By the evening meal, everyone knew about the human cadet who had made an impossible shot with a primitive rifle. Senior officers who normally never visited the training facility began appearing at the ranges to observe. Cadets who had ignored Emma now watched her carefully, studying her techniques. Kyle Henderson's reaction was the opposite. He became more hostile, more determined to prove that his advanced equipment and natural Zenthry abilities made him superior. At breakfast on day 8, he made his feelings clear. One lucky shot does not make someone a good marksman, he announced loudly enough for half the dining hall to hear. Humans always claim they have some special quality, but it is just pride talking. Today's night shooting exercise will prove it. Let us see how well that antique rifle works in the dark. Emma said nothing. She had learned from her grandfather that arguing wastes energy better spent on shooting. But Lisa, sitting across from her, spoke up. Emma does not need to prove anything. Her record speaks for itself. Kyle sneered. Of course you defend her. You humans always stick together. But tonight we shoot with thermal imaging and night vision. Technology that humans need because their eyes are so weak. My people can see in conditions that would leave you blind. We will see who has the advantage then. That night, the training range was dark. No lights illuminated the targets. Stars provided only faint light, and clouds covered even that. The conditions were deliberately harsh, designed to test the cadets' ability to shoot when they could barely see. Most cadets relied heavily on their weapons' night vision systems or thermal imaging. Electronic displays glowed green or red, showing computer-enhanced views of the target area. The technology was impressive, turning night into a kind of artificial day with outlined shapes and highlighted heat signatures. Emma had a different approach. She had attached a simple light amplification scope to her rifle. It was old technology, not much more sophisticated than the scopes used centuries ago on Earth. It gathered available light and amplified it, but it did not create false images or add computer overlays. What you saw was what was actually there, just brighter. The exercise began. Targets appeared at various distances, some stationary, others moving slowly in the darkness. The first shooters relied on their technology, letting computers identify targets and calculate firing solutions. Most did reasonably well. The advanced systems worked as designed. Kyle's turn came. His Zenthry eyes could naturally see better in low light than most species. Combined with his rifle's thermal imaging, he had a significant advantage. He fired with confidence, hitting target after target. His score was excellent. He finished with a satisfied expression and made sure to look directly at Emma as he left the firing line. "Cadet Brooks," Commander Vexenar called. Emma stepped to the line. The darkness was complete. Through her scope, she could see the target area as a murky green landscape. No computer markers. No thermal highlights. No targeting assistance. Just her eyes, the scope, and her training. But she did not immediately look through the scope. First, she stood in the darkness, letting her eyes adjust naturally. She listened to the night sounds, felt the air temperature, understood the environment. Only then did she settle behind her rifle. She fired steadily, methodically. Each shot was careful and deliberate. She trusted her instincts as much as her equipment. When she finished, her score was higher than Kyle's. Not by much, but enough. Enough to make the point. The pattern continued over the following days. Every exercise, every challenge, Emma performed at the top of the class or very close to it. She was not always first. Sometimes Kyle beat her. Sometimes other cadets had better scores on specific exercises. But her consistency was remarkable. While others had good days and bad days, Emma's performance remained steady. And her rifle, the one everyone had mocked, never failed her. After one particularly difficult training session, Lisa found Emma in the maintenance area. Emma was, as usual, cleaning her rifle by hand. Lisa sat down beside her, watching the methodical process. "Can I ask you something?" Lisa said. "Of course. How do you do it? Not just the shooting. I mean, how do you stay so calm? Everyone was mocking you. They said your rifle was junk. They said you would fail. But you never got angry. You never argued. You just kept going." Emma thought for a moment, her hands still working the cleaning cloth along the barrel. "My grandfather told me something when I was young. He said that words are just noise, but bullets tell the truth. If I wasted energy arguing with people, I would have less energy for shooting. So I let my shots do the talking." Lisa nodded. "That makes sense. But it is more than that, right? You are not just good. You are different. You shoot in a way nobody else here does." "I shoot the way people shot for hundreds of years," Emma replied. "Before computers calculated everything. Before sensors did the thinking. Snipers used to spend days learning a single location. They studied wind patterns by watching grass move. They understood bullet drop through experience, not programming. They became part of the environment instead of fighting against it." She paused, assembling the rifle with practiced ease. "Technology is wonderful. It helps us do things we could never do before. But it can also become a crutch. If you rely only on computers, what happens when they fail? What happens when the equipment breaks?" "You keep shooting," Lisa said quietly. "Exactly. Because the fundamentals never change. Breathing, trigger control, reading the environment, understanding your weapon. These things worked 1,000 years ago, and they work now." Emma pulled out her grandfather's notebook. The pages were worn, covered with notes and diagrams in faded ink. "This is my real secret. Not the rifle. This. Decades of knowledge. My grandfather wrote down everything he learned. Every shot he took in combat, he analyzed later. What worked? What did not? What the conditions were. He turned experience into data, but data he understood because he lived it." She handed the notebook to Lisa, who opened it carefully. Pages of handwritten calculations filled the book. Wind formulas. Bullet drop tables. Notes about different weather conditions and how they affected shots. Sketches of shooting positions. Tips for reading terrain. It was an education in physical form. "This is incredible," Lisa whispered. "This is better than any training program." "It is different," Emma corrected. "Not better. Different. Training programs teach you what usually works. This teaches you what specifically worked in specific situations. When you combine the two, when you understand both the technology and the fundamentals, that is when you become truly good." Lisa handed back the notebook. "Will you really teach me? Like you said you would." "Yes. But you need to be patient. This is not something you learn in a day or a week. It took me years to understand what my grandfather was teaching me. And I am still learning. Over the next 2 weeks, Emma worked with Lisa during free time. She taught her how to read wind without instruments, how to estimate distance by eye, how to calculate bullet drop using simple math. Lisa struggled at first. Her mind wanted to reach for computer assistance. But gradually, she began to understand. The fundamentals made sense once you understood the principles behind them. Other cadets noticed. A few asked questions. Emma answered them all honestly. She was not trying to keep secrets. The knowledge her grandfather had given her was meant to be shared, meant to make shooters better. Some cadets dismissed her teachings, preferring to trust their technology. But others listened and learned. Kyle Henderson was not one of them. He watched from a distance, his expression growing darker. The human who everyone had mocked was now teaching others. People listened to her, respected her. And that respect came not from having the best equipment, but from having the best skills. It challenged everything he believed about superiority through technology and natural ability. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Captain Hayes gathered all the cadets for a special briefing. His expression was serious. "In 3 days, you will face your final qualification," he said. 1 shot. 4,000 meters. Moving target. Extreme conditions. Only 3 cadets need to succeed for the class to pass. Those 3 will be offered positions in the Galactic Rangers. The rest will receive standard military postings. A murmur ran through the assembled cadets. 4,000 meters was an extreme distance. Few shooters in the galaxy could make such a shot even in perfect conditions. With environmental challenges added, it seemed nearly impossible. "You have 3 days to prepare," Hayes continued. "Use them wisely." Dismissed. As the cadets dispersed, the weight of the challenge settled over them. This was it. Everything they had worked for came down to 1 shot. 1 chance to prove themselves worthy of the elite. Emma walked back to the barracks alone, her rifle case in hand. 4,000 meters. Her grandfather had never attempted a shot that far. Neither had she. It would require perfect conditions, perfect calculation, perfect execution. And they would not get perfect conditions. Hayes had promised extreme challenges. She opened her grandfather's notebook to a blank page near the end. Then she began to write, starting her own notes for what might be the most important shot of her life. The morning of the final qualification arrived with heavy gray clouds and wind that bent the trees near the range. Emma woke before dawn, as she had every day of her life since her grandfather began training her. She ate a simple breakfast, checked her rifle 3 times, and arrived at the range an hour early. She was not the only one. Other cadets were already there, preparing their equipment with nervous energy. The observation deck overlooking the range was filled with senior officers from across the Galactic Coalition. This was not just a qualification anymore. It had become an event. Everyone wanted to see who would succeed at the impossible shot. Captain Hayes stood in the observation booth next to Commander Vexnar. Both watched the cadets preparing below. Vexnar turned to Hayes with a question in his reptilian eyes. "You believe the human female will succeed," Vexnar said. It was not quite a question. Hayes looked down at Emma, who was sitting quietly beside her rifle, eyes closed, breathing slowly. "I believe she has the best chance," he replied. "Because of her weapon?" "No. Because of her training. That rifle is just metal and wood. What matters is what she knows. What she understands about shooting that most of these cadets never learned because they rely on computers to do the thinking for them." At precisely 0800 hours, Commander Vexnar's voice boomed across the range through speakers. "Cadets, take your positions. Today's qualification is final. 1 shot per cadet. Target distance is 4,000 meters. The target is a combat drone programmed with evasive maneuvers. Environmental conditions are uncontrolled. Wind speed is currently 30 kilometers per hour with gusts to 50. Humidity is 85%. Gravity field generators are creating fluctuations of 0.03 standard gravities." He paused, letting the difficulty sink in. Only 3 cadets need to succeed for this class to pass. Those 3 will be offered immediate placement in the Galactic Rangers, 1st Recon Division. All others will receive standard postings. Good luck. The first cadet stepped to the firing line. The target drone launched into the gray sky, a tiny speck even at launch. At 4,000 meters, it would be nearly invisible. The cadet's plasma rifle hummed as its computer tried to acquire a targeting lock. The weapon beeped frantically, unable to get solid data through the wind and distance. The cadet fired anyway, hoping. The bolt of energy dissipated long before reaching the target. Miss. One by one, cadets attempted the shot. One by one, they failed. The conditions were simply too difficult. Targeting computers could not handle the combination of extreme distance, high wind, and moving target. Some shots came close, grazing the drone's shields. But close was not enough. The exercise required a direct hit, a kill shot. After 20 attempts, not a single cadet had succeeded. Tension mounted in the observation deck. Some officers whispered that the test was too hard, that it should be modified. But Hayes remained silent, watching. Lisa Morgan's turn came. She had learned much from Emma over the past weeks, but this was beyond anything she had attempted before. She took her time, using the techniques Emma had taught her. She fired. The shot was good, better than most. It passed within meters of the drone. But meters might as well be kilometers. Miss. Lisa walked away from the firing line with her head down, disappointed but not surprised. She had done her best. Sometimes, your best is not enough. Kyle Henderson's name was called. He approached the firing line with determination written across his blue-tinged face. His rifle was the most advanced on the range, equipped with every possible enhancement. If technology could make this shot, his weapon could do it. He spent several minutes letting his targeting computer analyze the conditions. The system ran thousands of calculations per second, building a firing solution. Finally, it beeped with a recommended shot. Kyle lined up carefully. His finger tightened on the trigger. He fired. The plasma bolt streaked toward the distant sky. For a moment, it looked promising. But then the wind shifted, the gravity fluctuation hit at exactly the wrong time, and the shot curved away. Another miss. Kyle stood frozen, staring at his rifle's display as if it had betrayed him. His hands shook slightly. He had been so sure. The technology was supposed to make it possible. But it had not been enough. Cadet Brooks, you are final shooter. Emma stood and picked up her rifle. Every eye in the facility was on her now. She was the last hope for the class to pass. If she failed, everyone failed. The pressure would have crushed most people. But Emma had learned from her grandfather that pressure is just another condition to account for, like wind or gravity. She walked to the firing line slowly, set down her rifle case, opened it with deliberate care. The wooden stock gleamed dully in the gray light. She assembled the rifle with movements so practiced they seemed automatic. But her mind was not automatic. Her mind was completely present, analyzing everything. The target drone launched. Emma did not immediately track it. Instead, she stood upright, rifle at her side. She closed her eyes. She felt the wind on her face, noting its speed and direction. She felt the subtle wrongness in her inner ear that told her about gravity fluctuations. She listened to the sound of wind through the trees, understanding its patterns. In the observation booth, an officer whispered to Vex NAR, "What is she doing?" "The target is getting farther away." "She is reading the planet," Captain Hayes said quietly. His eyes never left Emma. Emma opened her eyes. She pulled out her grandfather's notebook and a pencil. While other cadets watched in disbelief, she began making calculations. Wind speed at ground level. Estimated wind speed at altitude. Bullet drop over 4,000 meters. Time of flight. The gravity fluctuations and their timing. Humidity effects on air density. She wrote numbers, crossed them out, wrote more. Her pencil moved steadily across the worn paper. 3 minutes passed. The drone continued its programmed flight path, moving farther and farther away. Some officers shifted nervously. Was she giving up? Had the pressure broken her? Emma closed the notebook. She made final adjustments to her scope, turning the knobs with precise clicks. Then she settled into her shooting position. Her breathing slowed. Her heartbeat steadied. Through the scope, she could barely see the drone. It was 4,337 meters away now, according to the rangefinder. Even farther than required. But Emma was not thinking about the difficulty. She was thinking about her grandfather's voice in her memory. Steady breathing. Smooth trigger pull. Trust your calculations. Trust your training. Trust yourself. Her finger touched the trigger. She felt the wind gust, waited for it to pass. Felt the gravity fluctuation, understood its rhythm. Saw the drone's movement pattern, predicted where it would be. Everything came together in a single moment of perfect clarity. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. The sound echoed across the silent range. Then came the waiting. At this distance, the bullet needed more than 4 seconds to reach its target. 4.5 seconds where the entire Galactic Coalition seemed to hold its breath. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. 4. The drone continued flying, tiny against the gray sky. Had she missed? 5 seconds. The drone exploded. A bright flash of light and falling debris. The electronic scoreboard updated. Distance, 4,337 meters. Status, direct hit. Kill confirmed. The observation deck erupted in noise. Officers stood, pointing, talking excitedly. Some checked their instruments as if they could not believe what they had just witnessed. Others simply stared at the distant point where the drone had been. On the range below, the cadets stood in stunned silence. Then, slowly, Lisa Morgan began to clap. The sound was soft at first, then louder. Another cadet joined her. Then another. Soon the entire line was applauding. Even Kyle Henderson stood with his hands together, though his expression was complex, mixing respect with something that might have been shame. Emma worked the bolt of her rifle, ejecting the empty brass cartridge. It fell into her waiting hand, still warm from the shot. She looked at it for a moment, this small piece of metal that had just traveled over 4 kilometers to accomplish the impossible. Then she carefully placed it in her pocket with all the others. Captain Hayes descended from the observation booth. He walked across the range with measured steps, his face unreadable. The applause faded as everyone watched him approach Emma. He stopped in front of her and came to attention. Emma immediately stood straight, rifle held properly across her chest. Hayes saluted her. A formal, crisp salute that made Emma's eyes widen slightly. Instructors did not salute cadets. It was not done. But Hayes held the salute until Emma returned it. Then he spoke, his voice carrying clearly across the silent range. Cadet Brooks. New Academy record. 4,337 meters. Highest score in the history of this facility. He paused. There is something I said to you after your first long-range success. Something I whispered so others would not hear. I think they should hear it now. He turned to face the assembled cadets and officers. What I told Cadet Brooks was this. Only snipers know the sound of silence between heartbeats. Only snipers understand that the space between breathing in and breathing out is where the perfect shot lives. Only snipers know that all the technology in the galaxy cannot replace patience, skill, and understanding. He gestured to Emma's rifle. Some of you mocked this weapon. You called it primitive, outdated, useless. But this rifle, and the person behind it, just accomplished what none of your advanced technology could do. Do you know why? No one answered. Hayes continued. Because Cadet Brooks understands something fundamental. Technology is a tool. It enhances ability. But it cannot replace ability. When your computers failed today, you had nothing to fall back on. When her calculations were needed, she had years of training to rely on. That is the difference between a shooter and a sniper. He turned back to Emma. Cadet Brooks, would you explain your methods to your fellow cadets? I think they are ready to learn now. Emma stepped forward, still holding her rifle. She pulled out her grandfather's notebook, its pages worn from years of use. This notebook contains decades of knowledge. My grandfather was a sniper before the Galactic Coalition existed. He wrote down everything he learned. Every shot he took, he analyzed. What worked? What failed? What the conditions were. He turned experience into understanding. She opened to a page filled with calculations. Before I took that shot, I spent 3 minutes calculating. I measured wind speed by feeling it on my skin and watching grass movement. I estimated air density from humidity. I accounted for gravity fluctuations by timing their pattern. I predicted the drone's flight path by watching its movement. All of this without a computer. The same way snipers have done it for centuries. She looked around at the assembled cadets. I am not saying technology is bad. Technology is wonderful. But you must understand the fundamentals first. If you rely only on computers, you become helpless when they fail. If you understand the principles, the technology makes you better. But the principles alone can still get the job done. Kyle Henderson stepped forward from the crowd. I turned to him. He looked at Emma for a long moment, then spoke. I was wrong. The words seemed difficult for him. I mocked your rifle. I mocked your methods. I thought technology and natural ability were enough. Today you proved they are not. Would you teach me? Emma smiled. Yes. I will teach anyone who wants to learn. 3 months later, graduation day arrived. The ceremony was held in the main assembly hall, with representatives from dozens of worlds in attendance. Emma stood in the front row of graduating cadets, wearing the dress uniform of the Galactic Coalition. On her chest were the markings of the Galactic Rangers, 1st Recon Division. She had ranked first in the class. Lisa Morgan stood beside her, wearing the same Ranger insignia. She had ranked third. Between them should have been the second-place cadet, but that cadet had declined Ranger placement, preferring a technical role. Lisa leaned close and whispered, "We made it." Emma nodded. Kyle Henderson was in the second row. He had finished in the middle of the class, but his shooting had improved dramatically after Emma taught him the fundamentals. He caught her eye and gave a small nod of respect. After the ceremony, Captain Hayes found Emma standing alone near the equipment storage area. She was checking her rifle one more time before departure. He carried a small case. "Ranger Brooks," he said formally. Then he smiled. "That has a good sound to it." "Thank you, sir. For everything." "I should thank you," Hayes replied. "You reminded me why I became a sniper in the first place. Not for the technology. For the craft." He opened the case he carried. Inside was a scope, clearly old but beautifully maintained. "This was from my service rifle. The one I used to set the old Academy record. I want you to have it." Emma's eyes widened. "Sir, I cannot. This is yours. It was mine. Now it should belong to the person who broke my record." He lifted the scope from the case. "Your grandfather's rifle is excellent. But this scope is designed for extreme distances. Together, they will serve you well." Emma took the scope with careful reverence. It was heavier than hers, with more precise adjustments. She could see the care that had gone into maintaining it over the years. "I will honor this gift," she said. "I know you will." Hayes offered his hand. They shook, two snipers across generations, connected by their understanding of the craft. That evening, Emma boarded a transport ship bound for Ranger headquarters. Her rifle case was secured beside her seat. Inside was her grandfather's rifle, now equipped with Captain Hayes's scope. A combination of old and older, tradition merged with experience, creating something that honored the past while serving the future. As the ship lifted off, Emma looked out the window at the academy growing smaller below. She thought about her grandfather, who had taught her that skill outlasts technology. She thought about Captain Hayes, who understood what it meant to be a true sniper. She thought about Kyle and Lisa and all the other cadets who had learned that sometimes the old ways work best. Across the galaxy, species brought their technology. They brought plasma weapons and targeting computers and artificial intelligence. They brought innovations that could do incredible things. But humanity had brought something else. Something that could not be programmed or upgraded or purchased. They brought patience. They brought discipline. They brought the understanding that the most sophisticated weapon is not the one in your hands, but the mind behind the trigger. And that knowledge, passed down through generations from teacher to student, was more valuable than all the technology in the stars.